Estás viendo la versión para YouTube de Sí, el podcast de Somos Innovación. Acompáñanos a explorar cómo a través de soluciones innovadoras los latinoamericanos vamos a mejorar nuestras vidas. El futuro llama.
Hi, I'm Federico Fernández. Welcome to a new episode of Sí, the SomosInnovacion podcast. This is a very special episode for several reasons. Firstly, because we have Jeff Booth with us. Secondly, because it will be in English. And lastly, because we're doing this episode in cooperation with Fundación Internacional Bases and the Austrian Economic Center. Today, as I mentioned, we'll be talking to Jeff Booth about innovation, exponential changes, technology, and Bitcoin. Jeff is a visionary leader who has lived at the forefront of technology change for 20 years. He is also the best-selling author of The Price of Tomorrow, Why Deflation is Key to an Abundant Future. This is probably one of the most significant books of the 21st century, and we'll be discussing about some of the ideas that Jeff presents there in this conversation for sure. On social media, you can follow him on Twitter at Jeff Booth, and you can buy his book on Amazon. I will link to everything on the description of this episode. Jeff, welcome to See.
Thanks for having me, Federico.
Thank you, and well, very, very happy to have you. And before we dig in about everything I want to ask you and talk to you, just I wanted to make a quick comment. This is, let's say, like a double pleasure and privilege to have you here because, well, not only I'm a great admirer of your work, of your book, which I read, and it's really something that I really enjoyed, and I think it's really one of the most important books of the past 20 years, but also because hopefully, and if things continue to improve as they are now, I'll be seeing you in person in Vienna, Austria, in November for an Austrian economics conference we're organizing, and you'll be one of the keynote speakers. So
I'm really looking forward to that. It's going to be nice to travel again.
Indeed. Yeah. Let's hope, with our overlords allow it in the end. Yeah. Anyway, whoever is interested in the conference and, meeting Jeff there, one of the things that, there's technology is definitely improving. And we're doing this that we're doing right now thanks to technology, but let's say the face-to-face interaction, the possibility to interact with someone during a coffee break or asking a question during a conference, those things that are still, probably we have missed them a lot in the last year and a half. And I think it will be a great opportunity. And everybody interested can go to austrianconference.org and find out more about the conference. But now, and sorry for the propaganda, I would like to start our conversation, Jeff, if you allow me, quoting your book, The Price of Tomorrow, just something that has to do with some data, and then ask you something. And the quotation I highlighted is the following. You tell us on your book that in 2000, the total debt in the world was approximately 62 trillion. And at the same time, the world economy in 2000 was 33.5 trillion. Since 2000, the economy has grown 33.5 trillion to about 80 trillion. But to achieve that growth, the total debt has grown to over 247 trillion as of the third quarter of 2018. These are pre-pandemic numbers. In other words, it has taken 185 trillion of global debt to achieve 46 trillion of global growth. These numbers are, scary, but the other thing, when I was reading and I didn't know about these numbers, and what I want to ask you first is, what kind of world are we living in that this is happening?
So an inflationary monetary system must grow. And if you allow deflation to hit that, the inflationary monetary system, it unwinds. And because there's nothing backing it, it's just paper or credit that's backing it. it keeps unwinding. And so what you have are two different systems clashing against each other. One, technology is trying to save our time, give us more for less. But we live in a system that is wired the exact opposite, trying to give us less, trying to make our money worth less, and takes our time. And so those forces are colliding, and they can't be stopped. So what we're going through, and what most people talk about today and get stuck on, are the second order implications, kind of two orders away from the primary thing driving it all. So what we're talking about right now, the march of technology trying to give us more for less against an inflationary monetary system, is what people should look at first before anything else, before political, before environmental, before anything else. All of those are subcomponents of this massive fight of our time. When you realize that in 20 years it took $185 trillion of printing to be able to, or maybe it's not all printing, maybe debt creation to create growth per se, you realize that's unstable, and there's no way to ever pay that back. And that's why governments are monetizing that debt today and printing money. But it doesn't change the fundamental system. It just creates more and more instability in the system. And what's important to realize is both systems are, I'd say, exponential. You have exponential technology driving one way, so we get more for less on an exponential scale, and we can dive into that a little bit if you'd like to. But to try to keep the existing system alive, that means debt creation or monetary easing or printing must be exponential on the other side of the coin.
Yeah, indeed. And there's I wanted to talk to you about the concept of exponentiality, because I think it's key to your thinking. It's key to the main thesis you want to defend in your book. And let's say it's key to how you see these things playing out. And in this sense, my question is, why do you emphasize so much in the concept of exponential changes in technology? And again, and you have magnificent examples about this, why is this concept of exponentiality sometimes not that easy to grasp for us?
So our brains project our present reality into the future. And they have a really hard time with exponential patterns. And so I use this example, and I've used this example on probably tens of thousands of people on stages around the world. And the example is, if I fold a piece of paper on itself, just a normal 11.5 by 8.5 by 11 piece of paper on itself, if I fold it on itself once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, and I keep folding it on itself, I ask the audience, at fold 50, how thick would this piece of paper be? And at fold 4 or 5, it's like about this thick. And so the answer that I invariably get from 99% of the people, maybe 99.9% of the people, is about 2 inches. Now, if I got a different answer, if you had a distribution curve and said 50% of the people or 20% of the people get the answer, that'd be something. But because nobody gets the answer unless you've heard it before, it tells us we're really bad at exponential patterns. Now, what is the answer? How thick is that piece of paper at fold 50? And the piece of paper would fold from the earth where you're sitting to the sun. And I know what people will do now on your podcast. They'll go and Google that to see if that's true and everything else, because it just blows your brain.
I did that too as well.
So I love that. But here's the thing you'll do right after that. You'll think now you know it, and you'll be fooled by it everywhere else, because you think now you know a parlor trick, and you'll tell your friends, but you won't really know it. And that's the most important part. just because you know a trick that on fold 50 that it reaches the sun, now you'll think you know exponential, and you don't, because otherwise you would see it everywhere in your life. Why does that matter? Because technology driven by Moore's law, but more than that today, I explain that quite a bit in my book, but let's just use Moore's law as a placeholder, is technology is doubling every 18 months to 2 years. Faster processing speed, faster. And so that means the rails of our world are moving to a technology-enabled world at a pace we cannot comprehend. And so where are we on that curve? We're on fold 33. If you use the analogy to a piece of paper folding to the sun, we're on fold 33, we're moving to fold 34. Why does that matter? Because now we're in the steep steps. Now we're in the really big steps. And in 2 years, the last 50 years of technology literally doubles. So when you think about, when we see around the corner and we're looking at self-driving cars and we're looking at things that are like, they sound like science fiction coming in, you can expect a faster rate of progress from here on other things that you can't even comprehend, artificial intelligence, and other things that it's really hard to comprehend. Now tie that to the financial system that we built for a different time and is collapsing before our eyes. That path gives us more and more for less. Things turn into information. Information becomes free. I'll give you a real example. So photography, Kodak had essentially a monopoly on photography around places we would go to buy film, to go and then drive back to the store. Think about all the jobs in extra trips to the store to buy film, then to go have it developed, then go have it edited because we didn't like it, like something, we had it brushed up, all on physical things. And that meant we took a small amount of photos that were physical items. And today, Kodak is gone. We have an abundance in photos, complete abundance, editing software, everything else. It's an infrastructure around photos without any of those jobs. And so where does that show up in positive GDP? And the point is, it doesn't. As things turn into information and information becomes free, we get more for less. We get exponentially more for less. But we're wired into a system that tries to, and so now the system has to overcome that productivity gain. And by inflating into that productivity gain, essentially you concentrate the wealth and power of that productivity gain. You rob citizens of the productivity gain. They still get photos for free, but their house prices go up, their food prices go up, other things that haven't been digitized yet go up a lot more to offset what I just said. And so again, two completely different systems operating against each other. So now think about what a rational actor would do in that system. So that what you do, what I do. Now, every one of us votes with our time and money to get more for less, right? We don't go looking, where can we find terrible value? We're trying to find value all the time. So if we're trying to find value all the time, every rational actor in society is trying to find more value. And technology is giving us that more value, more and more or less. How can we concurrently believe in a system that must give us less value? We believe we want more value. You want more value. Every one of our friends wants more for less. Technology allows that. But then we almost have this incongruence in our brain, because that is deflation. And it's what it allows. And we're voting for it all the time. And then we believe in, it's almost like believing in a fairy tale, that the system for everybody else, when you roll up all of those individual choices, must have inflation in it, which is exactly the opposite. Essentially, inflation is I want the value of my money to be worth less each year. and it doesn't make any sense. But we've grown up in that other system, and it's hard to see. So people have, and rewiring your brain about what we just said, and it almost doesn't matter because technology is moving that way anyways. There's no way central banks could stop this over time without concentrating all power in a centralized authority. Over time, because it's a structural problem. And this, and again, politics doesn't matter what side of the aisle you're on. It doesn't matter taxes or anything else. What matters is how much printing is happening, and that's and it's a fundamental fight of our time, I would say.
I am Argentinian in origin. We have in Argentina, one of the strange privileges that we have is I have lived under hyperinflation. So let's say I know how this craziness, in monetary policy, where it can end up. And trust me, I'm not a defender of inflation at any, in any way. But on the other hand, and this is something that struck me when I read your book, is that in many, even academic circles, deflation is in many ways considered like the worst evil. Let's say it's not the lesser evil. If you have deflation or inflation, deflation is worse. Why do you think there is, let's say, still? Is it because of the fiat currency monetary system we live, or are there deeper reasons why still deflation is considered really like the worst thing that it can happen to an economy?
So what you'll hear is at level one. Think about it, when a system is in this built. Let's say it's this unstable, and it's built like this and everything else. Peeling back the onion to see what's actually true is really important, because there's a whole bunch of different levels of what you'll hear. And so at the top level, let's say level one, what you'll hear about deflation is this: people won't buy things and the entire market will stop, right? That's the kind of level is what you'll think. And now just put that through your own filter of judgment and question that. What would you buy things? I buy a phone just about every year, even though I know the next year's phone is going to be will give me more for less. I buy a computer every 2 years, even though I know that if I wait, I could get a computer for less that gives me more. I buy a whole bunch of things. I buy food every day. There's a whole bunch. I'm not going to not buy food. I need housing. There's a whole bunch of things that are not going to stop me from purchasing things, because what people are saying in there is the only reason people will purchase is if we make the currency worth less. And it doesn't stand up to intellectual rigor. Yes, there would be less purchasing because people would have a low time preference. They would really think about the things, and they wouldn't over consume because they're trying to buy things to escape a devaluing currency. Yes, there would be some of that, but to say we can't live in a productivist economy with our money being without our money being devalued makes no rational sense at all. And I would debate anybody on that topic, but ask yourself, does that make any rational sense? Forget what you've been taught. Now, the second thing, when you have a credit bubble like we have, and you allow deflation to happen, if governments from the existing system allow deflation to happen, it keeps on unwinding to zero. Every bank has to be nationalized because you have a system based on credit that has nothing backing it. And money is just an arbitrary concept for our time. So if you have something that's built on this massive debt that really isn't any, there's nothing there, and you owe me money and somebody owes, and all the assets start failing and going down, and I can't pay you back, but my money I'm paying you is owed to somebody else, and everything, it just keeps on unwinding. So unfortunately, there is going to be a time. Winter is coming. You can't delay this. The inevitability is coming of a system, because the system cannot keep going the way it's going. And what will happen is, because of the economic shock, really a credit bubble unwind, which is the same thing that happened in the Great Depression. People fear deflation, but not because deflation is a bad thing normally. It's because debt has been built up and it has to cleanse. And so they misinterpret which is the driver, and the depression comes after a debt bubble that can't be repaid. And so we will go through some sort of cleansing here, but they're different pieces. If you just ask yourself, so what's really important here is we measure a system from the system we're in, and every single measurement comes from that system. People don't ask the question. They think housing prices always go up, and they fail to ask, would housing prices go up if there wasn't $185 trillion of global stimulus in the last 20 years? And the answer is simply no, they wouldn't, right? They'd probably come down. But that fear paralyzes people, and they say, okay, what then? Because they don't know how the whole system works. But again, so we have a system change from one system, and we have to move to a new system, which is required by technology. It's a requirement, new system, and it's very unlikely the existing system can change itself. And from the book, I use a number of different examples, but if you use the Kodak example, Kodak invented the digital camera. Why didn't they capitalize on it? And they didn't, because their entire infrastructure was built on a different system. And it's really hard for somebody to take something that they can't make money on, a new system that moves to free, and imagine a world, even though they invented the technology that actually created that world, to be able to capitalize on something that's a new system, because everything feeds back. All of the people they hire is lower cost film, higher quality film, more stores to get more people to buy more film and everything else. And they're driving themselves off the cliff at the same time the industry is moving the other way. It's pretty standard. It's standard in business. And if you think some of the best minds in the world are in these businesses and they don't see it, just because technology changed the rules because of how fast things are moving, and they don't see it and get in front of it, how can we expect our elected leaders that sit on top of an entire global financial system that drives everything else, how could we expect them to see it? So again, there's just two different systems, and there's no way out of the existing system without three ways out. One, centralize all control in government. And if you're voting for that system, if you believe in the existing system as is, that's the system you're voting for. And you're helping that happen. But by the way, it's really easy for that to happen. And why is it easy for that to happen? Because most inflation enriches the rich more, their assets go up, and it picks the pockets of the middle class and poor. And the middle class and poor, when you force prices up, their housing prices go up, their food prices go up, and they turn to the same government that created the problem and ask for more stimulus to pick their pocket more, to concentrate more power. And it's often said, well, we're going to tax those people more to be able to redistribute. It never happens. It actually, because the taxes can't solve the problem. Most of the revenue comes from inflation. But people will vote for more, thinking they're voting against party lines and voting to be able to redistribute. And what ends up happening is you drive inflation faster and you cause it to happen faster, centralizing all control. That's path one. Path two is revolution and war. What typically happens through path one is there's a whole bunch of people left out, and as you consolidate power, it other people that create essentially an us versus them narrative that says it's those people that are creating the problem from you. and people buy that because it's easy to believe. There's a whole bunch of rich people and they're poor, and they rise up and vote in somebody else or take over government by force or something like that. And then the only way to stay elected in that system is once you have controlled your own domestic economy and people, you need a bigger enemy. So you need to create an enemy in China, or you need to create it somewhere else. So you can stay in power. So that's path 2, and most currency resets happen through path 2, right? So if you look at Bretton Woods after World War II, that was path 2. If you look at what led to World War II through World War I and what was happening around the globe, it was path 1 too. So and so these currency resets happen, and essentially in the currency reset you get, after the trust us, this time we won't do it again, right? And that you have a new economic order. That's a pretty bad spot for the world to go through, especially where technology is with artificial intelligence and robotics and everything else. War will not look the same as it has. It could be a lot more frightening. Or path 3, a different system. And for that system, and typically in business, what ends up happening is because a business can't see something changing, and a technology empowers people in a different way. When a technology empowers people in a different way, it's a totally different system, deriving value differently from the existing structure. And it's pretty predictable what ends up happening out of the existing system as they try to fight that. We're seeing that right now. But anyway, what that would say is innovation always comes from the outside in. It's never invented within the system. And that's what you're seeing through Bitcoin right now. You have a new monetary system, a new monetary network, building, accelerating, driving a network effect that in my mind could be the best way to transition to a really bright, hopeful future, where deflation allows abundance for all, where the productivity gains in a deflationary system driven by Bitcoin move to the most people.
And Jeff, of course, I want to go back to this, what you mentioned, that winter is coming and what kind of transformation we're going to face. But before that, one more question regarding, let's say, the current system, the fiat/inflationary system that we live in. Do you think a case could be made, or is it something that at least worries you a little bit, that the abundance of money, of cheap credit, debt, of credit, of money creation has in a way stimulated these technological changes that
yes,
that they can be twins in several ways, these two exponentialities. Do you think there could be a causal relationship there as well?
So what you're saying, essentially you're saying, does the money printing accelerate technology growth? And I would say yes, and the money printing actually accelerates the removal of labor. And why? Because as you print money to make prices go up, as you force prices up, and all of society wants lower prices or more for less, then as a business, what the businesses must do is remove labor faster with technology to be able to remain competitive, to be able to provide value to society. Otherwise, the business goes broke. And so there's a race to technology to remove labor faster, and there's a whole bunch of technology that allows that to happen. And as you remove that labor and prices come down out of that, then you have to print more money to make it to make prices go up, more offsetting. That example I used before on photos, it's everywhere. And so more and more of if you look at your iPhone, if you look at your and think about the number of things you don't buy anymore because they're there for free, you can see that. And that's coming. It's just starting. Most of the deflation is in front of us. So there's less and less of a market that governments are forcing prices up. And so those prices that are being forced up, food, housing, everything else, cause this as a social unrest. But again, you need to think about them two different systems with feedback effects driving in opposite directions, reinforcing those two systems, reinforcing the speed, the rate of those two systems.
Yeah. There are two things on your book, but there are probably more, but two that really caught my attention, and I want to ask you that. Let's say it seems that you are telling us this time is actually different. And, and those two things that I want to ask you are, let's say, how the job creation will be impacted by technology. And the second one that I think is also very interesting is the situation of the current tech monopolies compared to other monopolies that we've seen in the past.
And so if you think about the tech monopolies today, and I would say monopolies used to be broken up because they had predatory pricing, and that's why and they got really big and they scaled their distribution and they blocked others out, and then they kept really high margins to be able to block others out. Some of the monopolies today are built differently. They're built on network effects. In other words, they're giving you more value all the time. And use Google for an example. Yes, Google makes a lot of money. Do you want Google to be turned off tomorrow? And again, we vote with our time, and we're voting all the time for things that give us more for less. And so constructed against technology, as again, things turn into information, and information becomes free because it moves on the internet on a layer that just is, you can charge a penny to everyone in the world and make a lot of money. And if distribution is free, you don't have the cost of that distribution. Look at the Zoom call we're on now. This didn't exist 5 years ago, 10 years ago. If you knew what was coming to Zoom next, or not just Zoom, but all the other video, because I'm at the front end of these technology waves, I'm seeing some of the demos on what's coming. It'll feel like we're in the same room. We could have 4 people on this call, and I could whisper to you, and the other people wouldn't hear it. And and again, when I started, I said we tend to project our current examples forward instead of understanding the underlying trend on what changes, and then we expect our behaviors to not change because of projecting our existing forward. So our behaviors have already changed because of Zoom. And how much more will they change over time? And using another example here, if we can work from home, and do borders matter anymore? Wouldn't I instead of, if people can work from home, wouldn't I hire the best people globally and have a way bigger pool of an audience that I could hire from rather than locally? If work from home, and we're measuring work from home right now on Zoom, and it's still effective. Imagine what it's going to do. Imagine what it's going to do with the future that I'm talking about, with where video conferencing is going. So a lot of things change, and our brains aren't very good at seeing all of those changes. We take one example, and we think everything else will stay the same. Using one example, we can't see all of the other consequences. So monopolies today are built by giving you more value, not less, and they're built on a network effect, and so that's so it's really hard to break them up. Could you break them up? Yes, you could, but then when you're competing with global monopolies that are trying to do the same thing, Google, Amazon, such, if you think about what their real power is behind Microsoft, but the real power is the race to artificial intelligence. Behind the scene, they're collecting all of this data. If you use Amazon Alexa or Google Home, you already know, oh, wow, this thing is getting better and better and better. I can talk to it. I can almost talk to it like Jarvis on Iron Man, and that's today. And it's all done just through this AI interface and data and everything else. And it's getting better and better, smarter and smarter all the time at a rate that we can't really believe. Where does that go? Now, if the US government says, okay, I'm going to break up these monopolies so they can't do that, do you think China would do that? Or do you think China will just take the monopolies into the government and control that power in the government? And so we're dealing at a very different time than people realize we're in. And the consequences, I'm actually glad you're doing this. I'm glad you're doing the Austrian conference. I'm glad because more people need to talk about what this looks like, because the consequences of trying to cling to an old system are really frightening for humanity.
And before we go to the topic of Bitcoin, that I want to ask you, and this is related in a way. You were mentioning, you mentioned several times our brains are not, let's say, easily capable of grasping all these changes that we are experiencing, the concept of exponentiality. And you mentioned, we have been discussing of two very key issues to the government, which are borders and money. Are you afraid of that this acceleration in changes? Because what you say is absolutely true. Where would you physically be working will be very little of very little importance in right now, and in the future more. The same, let's say, and there will be alternatives also. There are alternatives of how can you make your income, Are you afraid of hysterical reactions by governments when they see that these changes are happening and are changes that are coming completely from the outside, from the civil society, if you want?
So again, what do people do? And so I look at all governments as just people, right? And most well-intentioned, not all well-intentioned. And a system design will attract a whole bunch of people that can take advantage of a system, that you could take advantage of a system, just because people will try to gain authority over somebody else through a flaw in a system, and it's just normal. I wish that didn't look like that, but if you have a system in the design that we have today that allows for that, you can expect more and more of it. Essentially, we have a fraud in the base layer of money. We have misinformation money, and that misinformation is because money is just an abstract concept of our time. That misinformation steals our time. And if you have misinformation in money, which is just an abstract concept for our time, we trade our time for money, so that we can pay our bills and have a future time with hopefully more money, which is we can enjoy our time. If you have misinformation in money, who gets to control that misinformation? And then wouldn't, as a byproduct of that, having misinformation and money, wouldn't you expect misinformation everywhere else in society? And that's what we have today. And so do I expect this to continue? Yes. Do I expect a whole bunch of people to be fooled by it? Yes. Do I expect a whole bunch of people to try to hide in the system and remain silent? Just if you look in totalitarian governments, most people don't stand up to the totalitarian government. Most people hide within the system, and some people are enriched by it. Do I expect that to continue? Absolutely. Am I saying it's all totalitarian governments right now, or even if people know that it's going there? No, they don't. Most people don't. But when you have misinformation and money, you can expect the natural consequences of all the next steps. And that's what's happening. And it's happening at a faster and faster rate because technology is going the other way. And there isn't one thing today on this podcast or anything else that I'm not talking that isn't fact-based, right? People can open their own eyes and they can say, is technology driving at this rate? They can do research and they can look at exponential patterns and everything that I said. They can judge for themselves in the things they use every day and that are driven by technology. Is what I'm saying true? If all of that is true and it's going to continue, then a systems change is required. In that world, a currency that allows for deflation, that is digitally native, is a requirement for that world. It's a requirement. So to say that again, a digitally native currency that allows for deflation is a requirement. Every other path against that is a concentration of power that puts small amount of humans in domain over a huge amount of humans, and a race to be those small amount of humans with domain over every other human. That's an unfortunate consequence of where we are. Fortunate or unfortunate, every system change creates opportunity, right? It's just, where are you in that opportunity, and what do you see? Are you leading that system change? Are you Instagram, or are you Kodak? Are you are you Blockbuster, or are you Netflix? And so where are you on that? Are you Sears, or are you Amazon?
And why is Bitcoin? Let's say why are you so much an advocate for Bitcoin? What advantages you see in Bitcoin that maybe there are not in other digital currencies? What do you see there that makes you so, let's say, interested in Bitcoin as an alternative to the current system?
Well, I won't be able to go into it in enough depth on a podcast, but because of the system design, because of 21 million hard cap in Bitcoin, because it's divisible by each Bitcoin is divisible by 100 million, because of a whole bunch of things, that is essentially you have an open decentralized network that acts like it acts like TCP/IP. It's like the internet itself, the internet of money. And that's a big, that I think it could be, and it won't look like it today, but if we look back from the future to today, or to 2010, or 2008, it might look like humanity's greatest invention. And because it allows for the saving of our time, every single person can be their own bank. You don't have to trust somebody else, and you're trusting code. Nobody can change those rules. It's decentralized, it's open. And so your time cannot be stolen from you through an inflationary policy. What's way more important than that, because that alone is going to create, I believe, maybe I'm wrong, but I've done a lot of work, and I have not seen another way that we could get from one system to another system without going through the consequences, what I talked about in a reset, which I don't want for my kids. If enough people join the Bitcoin network, what ends up happening over time is, yes, it will be upwardly volatile. Yes, there's going to be a lot of people are going to make, I believe a lot of people are going to make a lot of money on that, and it's going to go up and down and everything else on the way. But what I really am in it for is now you have a digitally native currency that allows for deflation globally. And if borders don't matter, and we can't control our time, and you starting to be able to hire somebody from anywhere, then that's a must. So I could get on a plane and remember my code, my 12 words, and have my bank anywhere in the world. Nobody can take it from me unless they can hack my brain and take my memory. And so that's a really powerful innovation. But what it allows for is it allows the free market to actually work. And if you think about what ends up happening with all entrepreneurs, what I build a bunch of businesses, what entrepreneurs do is you create value for society. And if you don't, measured against the harsh reality of a whole bunch of other companies trying to create that value, if you don't, your business goes broke. So you're desperately trying to create more value for people all the time through an entrepreneurial process. all different ways, technology and everything else. And we have tools today that allow that to happen at a scale we never had. And so the outcome of having a currency that allows for deflation and a free market with entrepreneurs means that there's a constant competition to give you more for less. And it's a path that just, so as labor naturally falls out of a market because of our automation or AI or anything else, you don't force prices really high. So government can force hot prices higher and give that labor essentially a bunch of money to sit on their couch. You let prices fall and the natural order of things that should fall, and we increase our time as a result. And where does that time go? There's a lot of consequences to what I'm talking about. And what does that look like? And a lot of people will fight that change because they're scared of that change, and so they'll stay stuck. But it doesn't change the prerequisite, it doesn't change the magnitude. The change is coming anyways. And so what Bitcoin allows for that change, and it allows you to move into, I think about it, if I would move up a couple levels, if you have abundance in money, you have scarcity everywhere else, including your time. If you have scarcity in money, you'll have abundance everywhere else. That's really, it's probably as simple as that.
Indeed, and in a way, I mean, because when we think, for instance, as well, less money, less jobs, particularly the idea is that what will be suffering is massive starvation. But what we could be starting to see is almost like the recreation. I mean, if you allow me the metaphor of a new Athens or something like that, of people really being able to devote their times not only to the rat race of work in the more money-oriented meaning of the word.
Yeah, exactly. A whole new renaissance era is coming out of this, and it's hard to see, again, because we're stuck in a system and we don't know what we do if without our paycheck. But we don't question the fact that the only reason the jobs exist, or more jobs exist, not all jobs yet, but it's coming, is inflation is wage deflation. It's the other side of the coin of inflation. So wages go down in real terms. So you can keep labor because you're essentially paying them less to be able to keep labor. And so why that labor is rising up is because their money doesn't go as far as it used to, and they can't pay for their food or housing and everything else. But you can keep labor while you keep doing that. It's because you're essentially driving wages down, and you're trying to, by doing so, you're trying to slow the advance of technology taking them anyways. But at a certain point, the technology is going to take that labor anyways. We could dig holes with spoons to have more jobs. Why don't we dig holes with spoons? Because technology frees our time to do more productive things. That productivity on a deflationary system the time gained will move to society instead of being concentrated in government or the very wealthiest hands.
And do you find, and we're about in a few minutes, I know we have to finish, and well, we're very happy to having this conversation, but before finishing, do you feel, you mentioned on your book the example with AlphaGo and this game called Go that, it's similar to checkers and chess, it's a very interesting game, apparently very highly creative. And Google basically became the world champion with AI. And really the psychological impact, and let's say the impact to our humanity that we suffer with these narcissistic wounds, let's say. When you say, and on your book, you also say, if our jobs are a function of our intelligence, we will never defeat AI at one point. That's not going to happen. How this will, let's say, remake what is to be human? How do you see that anthropological part, let's say, of all these changes?
Just that question.
Last but not least.
Just that question. So let's first, so one of the things I wrote in the book that a lot of people are talking about is intelligence is error correction. If you think about how your human intelligence is error correction. And so every innovation, let's use the printing press, creates a whole bunch more information as human minds come in and create more information. So if you think who used the printing press at first? First it was churches, right, to control a narrative. And then different fractions of churches built more narratives around and tried to distribute their knowledge. And then as pricing came down with the printing press, and then more people started writing books as well. Science was formed really, or accelerated out of that, as people had ideas that were different than the church's ideas. And those ideas were now in writing and could be error corrected. And so other people came in and the best ideas won, and you got error correction, error correction, error correction. So our intelligence is on top of all of that error correction, and we're constantly doing it all the time. We still do it today. As a different example, if you think about anything you're good at, whether it's a sport, whether it's anything, whether it's economics, where it's what you're doing by being good at it is practicing something over and over and over and over and over again. And the more dedicated practice that you put at something, the better you are at it, to the point that some things just become subconscious that you don't even know that you know. It's just so easy for you to see those patterns, where it's for somebody new starting something, it would be really hard for them to kind of match how good you are because of that error correction. But what ends up happening with the human brain, we have to focus on a certain small amount of information to do that well. Now let's equate the same thing I just talked about to computers and artificial intelligence. And let's use the internet as example of a printing press. And it essentially created a whole bunch more information. And you have information creating a staggering amount of information every day. And in that information, a lot of misinformation too, similar to the printing press, but at a totally different scale. And you have artificial intelligence and humans correcting that information, error correcting, and artificial intelligence is growing, getting more and more powerful all the time, correcting that information. At some point, now here's again, our fear holds us back from exploring truth. So everything I just said is true. And what people will do by misunderstanding the trend to artificial intelligence is they'll stay stuck saying there's no way that a machine could be smarter than a human. There's no way, even though they see evidence in small domains. Like if you think the most, when we're the best of us, we could be 1% better than the second best and get way more money, right? So the way the economy is wired is it pays for performance and being the best. But now in narrow silos, you have computers that are like 100 times better than the best of us. and so why would we hire somebody way worse than that computer? And we wouldn't. And so it feeds back. And now those are today in narrow artificial intelligence in domains. But as that generalizes, at some point in the future, you could say 10 years, you could say 5 years, you could say 20 years, you could say 50 years. It almost doesn't matter, because the trend line, the entire trend line, is going to have less and less labor along that way to the time where artificial general intelligence and computers are smarter than us. Yet a lot of people are stuck here and they don't want to believe that. So they think about it as a light switch, that one day we don't have it, one day we have it, and everything changes. And it doesn't look like that. It's with us now. It's driving a whole bunch of the applications on your phone right now, and it's getting more and more powerful all the time. And so now that means that path in robotics, if you have super intelligence, in maybe even the narrow domains, and robotics. And I could show you some of the robotics stuff, not just what you would see on Boston Robotics, but I could show you some of the companies that are dealing behind that, Miniature, everything else. It would be hard to believe that there's going to be way more labor in the future required. It'd be really, really hard, unless you believe in fairy tales too. So with that path, you have to have a system that enables that path. Now to your real question. What does that mean for what do we do? And is that a frightening sense, or is it? It can be frightening. And I suspect that during that path, we will become more integrated with machines than we know. That what it looks like to be human today might look very different in the future. And that. But it might feel the exact same thing. Like if you think about intelligence and consciousness, what is consciousness in that? I could go on this topic for a long time, by the way. But what that looks like, that might be the passing of kind of from our meat sacks to a different consciousness that lets us expand beyond this world and everything else. And it is coming, and it's likely coming in our lifetime.
Yeah, indeed. Well, Jeff, it's been, I mean, I will continue talking to you the rest of your morning and the rest of my afternoon, but I committed to your assistance for 1 hour. I really appreciate your time. Next time, maybe we can have a conversation about metaphysics and philosophy of mind. Yep. Definitely, you're
I would love to. We'll do that in Austria.
Indeed. And well, to everyone who listened to us, don't forget to subscribe at any platform you use to listen to podcasts, or you can follow us on YouTube. And we'll see you in the next episode of Sí, the podcast of Somos Innovación.
Sí es el podcast de Somos Innovación. Visita SomosInnovacion.lat para suscribirte. Y no olvides compartir este episodio a través de tus redes.